You ever notice how life has a strange way of whispering to certain people? Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to make them pause, enough to make them feel like someone is trying to get their attention. Most people shrug it off, blame it on coincidence, or pretend they didn't feel that pull in their chest. But a very few, they sense it. They feel chosen, even if they don't admit it. They feel watched, guided, nudged towards something bigger than their routine little world. And that's what's happening right now. This moment isn't random. This message isn't an accident. It doesn't land in just anyone's hands. It finds the ones who are meant to hear it, the ones who've been wandering, waiting, wrestling with questions they're afraid to say out loud. The ones who've survived storms they weren't supposed to survive. The ones who keep getting back up when everything around them kept trying to knock them down. People have this strange idea that being chosen means being flawless, pure, untouchable, like some polished hero that walks out of the sky with perfect timing and perfect answers. But anyone who's lived long enough, anyone who's actually crawled through the darker corners of life, knows that's not how it works. The ones who are chosen rarely look like they're chosen. They look tired. They look bruised. They look like life has knocked them around more times than they can count. They look like they've been wrestling with things no one else ever saw. And that's exactly the point. Because being chosen has nothing to do with being perfect. It has everything to do with surviving what should have destroyed you. People forget that strength doesn't come from comfort. Purpose isn't born from easy roads or smooth stories. It comes from the cracks, the scars, the nights you didn't think you'd make it to morning. It comes from those moments when you were alone with your thoughts, when the world felt too heavy, when the silence felt like it was swallowing you whole. Those are the moments that shape someone who can carry a calling. Those are the moments that separate the ordinary from the chosen. Not the trophies, not the smiles, not the highlights everyone loves to show off. No, it's the shadows you walked through that qualified you in the first place. Most people don't understand this. They assume hardship means rejection, that pain means punishment, that the struggle is some cosmic sign they're unworthy. Meanwhile, the truth is the opposite. The struggle is the sign. The pain is the preparation. The nights you broke were the nights something greater was being built inside you. You weren't being destroyed. You were being tempered. You were being stretched, sharpened, refined, so that when the moment arrived, you wouldn't crumble under the weight of what you were meant to carry. Think about it. The people who've had the easiest paths are rarely the ones others look up to. They don't have the depth, the substance, the fire. They haven't fought enough battles to understand what real duty feels like. They haven't bled enough to recognize when something sacred is being handed to them. But you've been through the kind of storms that don't leave people the same. You've had to rebuild yourself from the inside out. You've learned to walk with wounds that never fully healed, learned to carry burdens that no one else even knew you were holding. And every time you thought you'd reached your limit, somehow you pushed past it. Somehow you stood back up. That's not coincidence. That's not luck. That's not random resilience. That's the mark of someone being prepared, someone being sculpted. Someone being trusted with a responsibility that small minds can't handle. Being chosen means life tested you in ways that most people would have collapsed under. It means you faced situations that were supposed to drown you, but instead you learned to breathe underwater. You adapted. You endured. You didn't break, not the way they expected you to. And deep down, I think you've always known that. You've always felt like you were carrying something heavier than everyone else, like you were seeing things others were blind to, like your heart responded to the world differently. You weren't meant to fit in. You weren't meant to walk the same path as everyone else. You were meant to be shaped by fire so you could handle what others couldn't. You were meant to feel deeply, to notice things, to survive things, to grow through things that were designed to awaken you, not defeat you. People love to judge the scars of the chosen because they don't understand them. They think scars mean failure, when scars actually mean survival. They think wounds make you weak, when wounds are proof that you showed up to a battle most people would have run from. They think your past disqualifies you, when in reality, your past is the evidence of your endurance, your capacity, your strength. It's the resume life built for you. It's the proof that you can handle more than the average person, that you can carry weight others would drop. Being chosen is messy, it's painful, it's demanding, but it's also unmistakable. It's not about perfection, it's about resilience, endurance, the stubborn refusal to stay down. It's about the way you keep going when logic says you shouldn't. It's about the strange force that kept pushing you forward even when you were exhausted, defeated, or certain you had nothing left to give. Because the truth is simple. If you weren't chosen, you wouldn't have survived half of what you've survived. You wouldn't have the instincts you have. You wouldn't feel that pull inside your chest every time life shifts. You wouldn't be here, listening to something that was meant to find you, meant to remind you who you are. People spend so much time blaming themselves for the chaos in their lives that they never stop to consider the possibility that the chaos wasn't meant to punish them at all. They look at their disappointments, their heartbreaks, their setbacks, and they think, what did I do wrong? Why is this happening to me? They treat every struggle like a verdict, every tough season like a sentence, every loss like proof that they're unworthy. But what if the struggle wasn't condemnation? What if it was construction? What if every wound, every tear, every moment you thought you were being torn apart was actually shaping you for something you couldn't see yet? People forget that growth never feels like growth while you're in it. It feels like pain, confusion, frustration, betrayal. It feels like being pushed to the edge of your limits, like being stretched in directions you didn't consent to. But preparation never feels gentle. Life doesn't ask whether you're ready, it makes you ready. It takes away the crutches, the illusions, the fake stability you were clinging to. It forces you to rely on strength you didn't know you had. And when you look back, you realize those moments you thought were punishment were actually the very moments that built your character, sharpened your instincts, and strengthened your spirit. You weren't being broken, you were being trained. Every setback you faced was lifting something out of you. Fear, insecurity, dependence, hesitation. Every closed door was redirecting you towards something better, something aligned, something meant for you. But because the process felt violent, you misread it. You thought the universe was against you, when in reality, it was removing the things that weren't strong enough to stay with you on the next part of your journey. It wasn't punishment. It was preparation disguised as discomfort. People think preparation should feel motivating, inspiring, gentle like some calm montage with uplifting music playing in the background. But real preparation is gritty. It's raw. It strips away illusions. It forces you to face the parts of yourself you'd rather ignore. It demands honesty, discipline, humility. It exposes what you need to fix, what you need to heal, what you need to strengthen. And most people run from that. They run because they don't understand the purpose hidden inside the pain. They run because they can't see the destination yet, so the journey feels cruel. But look back at the hardest moments of your life. Look at the nights that shattered you, the days that drained you, the losses that left you questioning everything. Those weren't random. They weren't meaningless. They were molding you. They were giving you depth, awareness, resilience. They were forcing you to grow in ways comfort never could. You weren't being punished. You were being transformed. You were being taught how to hold more, handle more, become more. If you think about it, the version of you before the struggle couldn't handle the things you're capable of handling now. That earlier version didn't have the strength, the clarity, the boundaries, the intuition. You learned those things the hard way because the hard way is the only way that sticks. Comfort teaches nothing. Ease builds nothing. Only pressure creates change. Only resistance builds muscle. Only fire refines metal. And maybe you've noticed this yourself, how the things that once frightened you barely bother you now. How the problems that used to overwhelm you now feel manageable. How the situations that used to break you no longer stand a chance. That didn't happen by accident. That's preparation. That's the hidden curriculum of pain. That's the proof that what you went through wasn't meant to crush you. It was meant to strengthen what needed to survive what's coming next. People think unanswered prayers mean rejection. But sometimes the silence is just timing. Sometimes the delay is development. Sometimes the thing you didn't get was the thing that would have destroyed you. And sometimes the reason life pushed you through the mud was because the person you needed to become couldn't be built any other way. Every tear you shed, every battle you fought, every moment you stood alone, those weren't punishments. They were reinforcement. They were shaping the chosen into the capable. They were building a version of you that could carry the weight of something you haven't yet seen. And maybe you're only now realizing that those storms weren't sent to stop you. They were sent to prepare the exact qualities you'd need for the next chapter that's finally making its way toward you. Most people walk through life begging for signs, praying for clarity, asking for direction. Yet when the signs show up, they dismiss them as coincidences. They pretend the nudge wasn't meant for them. The whisper wasn't loud enough. The discomfort wasn't a message. They look straight at the very thing they asked for and say, "No, that can't be it." Funny, isn't it? People want answers, but only if the answers look pleasant, polished, convenient. They don't realize that the most important signs rarely arrive dressed in comfort. They come wrapped in chaos. They come disguised as endings. They come through people leaving, plans collapsing, opportunities disappearing. But because the sign feels like loss, they ignore it. They don't understand that the universe rarely speaks in soft tones. It speaks in disruption. Think back to every moment that felt like a sudden shift, a strange pull, a quiet heaviness, an unexplained urge to walk away from something. That was a sign. That was direction. That was a message tailored for you. But life has a wicked sense of humor. It delivers clarity through confusion, alignment through agitation, truth through discomfort. And most people resist it, clinging to situations they've outgrown because familiarity feels safer than evolution. They don't realize that when something inside them starts to feel off, it's because that thing is no longer meant to hold a place in their next chapter. But instead of moving, they tighten their grip. They fight the very signs they once begged for. The truth is, signs rarely shout. They whisper, they nudge. They disturb your peace just enough to get your attention. A conversation that doesn't sit right. A relationship that drains instead of adds. A sudden shift in your energy when you walk into certain places. A dream that won't leave your mind. A heavy feeling when you're on the wrong path. These are not random sensations. These are instructions. But people silence their intuition the moment it interrupts their comfort. They ignore the signs because they don't want to accept what the signs demand: a change, a release, a pivot, a step into uncertainty. But here's the twist. The signs don't go away just because you pretend not to see them. They get louder. They escalate. A quiet nudge turns into a restless mind. A restless mind turns into friction. Friction turns into chaos. And when you still don't listen, chaos turns into a collapse big enough to force you out of what you refuse to walk away from on your own. People call it bad luck. They call it everything falling apart. They don't realize it's just the sign they ignored, returning with a stronger tone. Discomfort is life's megaphone. When the whisper doesn't work, the world starts shaking things loose. And the funny part? Once you finally move, once you finally follow that sign you resisted, you look back and laugh at how obvious it was. You realize the red flags weren't subtle. The warnings weren't small. The misalignment was glaring. But you weren't ready to accept the truth behind them. You weren't ready to let go, step forward, or outgrow what felt safe. Growth always feels threatening when you first face it. The sign wasn't the problem. Your attachment was. Signs don't always lead you where you want to go, but they always lead you where you need to go. Sometimes they lead you away from people you love because those people were stunting you. Sometimes they lead you out of environments that were poisoning your potential. Sometimes they push you into isolation so you can heal without distraction. Sometimes they shove you into opportunities you would have been too afraid to chase on your own. And sometimes they break everything familiar so you can finally build something real. Every sign you've ever ignored is a reminder that you already know more than you admit. You already feel the truth long before you say it out loud. Your intuition sees the ending before your heart accepts it. Your spirit senses misalignment before your mind understands it. And life keeps sending you signs until you finally trust what you've always known. People love to pretend signs are complicated, mystical, impossible to understand. But deep down, they know. You know. You've always known. Every time you felt that strange pull, that sudden discomfort, that unexplainable clarity, you weren't imagining it. You were being guided. You were being warned. You were being prepared. The signs weren't confusing. You were just afraid of where they were leading. And maybe that's the real trick of it all. The signs didn't change. You did. The moment you stopped fighting them, the moment you stopped denying your intuition, the moment you stopped calling your clarity overthinking, everything started to make sense. You realized the signs weren't meant to punish or scare you. They were meant to reroute you toward the path you kept drifting away from. They were the invisible hand turning you back toward the direction you were always meant to walk. People spend so much time pretending they're fine, pretending they don't see the cracks forming right underneath their feet. They walk around acting like life owes them a warning siren, a flashing billboard, a dramatic announcement before something collapses. But life isn't that courteous. It doesn't send invitations. It sends pressure. It sends tension. It sends a slow ache that grows louder each day until it becomes impossible to ignore. But people still try. They convince themselves that the heaviness they feel is just stress. The uneasiness is just imagination. The friction is just temporary. They underestimate their own awareness because it's easier to deny the truth than to confront it. The truth scares them. The truth threatens the version of themselves they've grown comfortable hiding behind. The truth demands action, and action demands courage they aren't sure they have. You ever watch someone who knows exactly what's wrong, but instead of fixing it, they tighten their smile and hope it vanishes on its own? It's almost comical. They pray for clarity while running from every sign that points to exactly what needs to change. They feel the tension in their chest every time they go back to a place they shouldn't. They feel their mood drop whenever they talk to someone who drains them. They feel the exhaustion of forcing themselves into spaces they've outgrown. Yet they stay. They cling. They pretend. Because pretending buys them time, even though that time is costing them everything. People don't fear the unknown as much as they fear losing what's familiar, even if the familiar is slowly destroying them. But life has a clever way of pushing you when you refuse to move. It starts with a whisper, an odd moment that feels off, a conversation that stings a little too deep, a sudden shift in energy you can't explain. If you ignore it, the whisper becomes pressure. Little inconveniences pile up. The things that once felt easy become heavy. You wake up tired even after sleeping. You feel out of place in rooms you used to feel at home in. But people tell themselves it's just a rough phase. They don't see the pattern forming, the message tightening around them like a rope pulling them toward the next phase. And when they still refuse to listen, life laughs and decides to make the lesson louder. A relationship ends out of nowhere. A plan falls apart. A door closes so abruptly you don't even have the chance to react. People call it bad timing. They call it misfortune. They never realize it's just life stepping in because they wouldn't step up. When you ignore your internal signals, life creates external ones. When you reject small warnings, you invite bigger ones. When you cling to something past its expiration, life has no choice but to tear it away. What makes it all so amusing is that deep down, they knew it was coming. You can always sense the shift long before the collapse. You feel the distance forming in relationships. You feel the dullness settling in your routines. You feel your soul shrinking in environments that no longer fit who you're becoming. You feel it, but you pretend you don't, because acknowledging it means admitting you've overstayed, admitting you're no longer aligned, admitting you're meant for something else, something bigger, something scarier. People love comfort even when it suffocates them. They choose the illusion of stability over the reality of growth. They'd rather stay stagnant than take a step that risks shaking their world. But life doesn't reward fear. It rewards movement. It rewards honesty. It rewards the brave act of walking away from what no longer matches your becoming. Those who listen to their inner signals move into new seasons with clarity. Those who don't, they get dragged into those seasons, kicking and screaming. But the amusing part? Once they finally break free, once they finally look back at what they held on to so desperately, they laugh. They see the warning signs were everywhere. They see the cracks they ignored. They see the moments that begged them to leave. They see the tension wasn't random, it was guidance. They realize the heaviness they kept trying to escape wasn't punishment. It was pressure pushing them toward alignment. Everything that felt like falling apart was actually falling into place, but they couldn't see it because they were too busy holding on to what was already slipping away. Life doesn't send warnings to scare you. It sends them to shape you, to redirect you, to remind you that you are evolving, and your surroundings must evolve with you. The tension you feel is not failure. It's transformation. It's the signal that you're outgrowing the chapter you're still trying to fit into. It's the universe nudging you toward the version of yourself you've been avoiding. And ignoring that tension doesn't save you from the shift. It only delays it while making the impact harder when it finally arrives. People spend their whole lives waiting for someone else to validate what they already know deep inside. They crave an outside voice to confirm their doubts, their suspicions, their fears, their hopes. It's almost funny how people will ignore their own instincts, their own observations, just because they want someone else to tell them it's real. They don't trust their own mind until the world nods in agreement. They don't believe what their heart whispers until someone else repeats it louder. And because of that hesitation, that constant need for confirmation, they miss the truth that was staring at them the entire time. You ever notice how the signs always appear long before the realization does? Someone's tone shifts. Their energy grows colder. Their presence becomes inconsistent. A door that used to open freely now creaks as if it resents being touched. Nothing drastic, nothing dramatic, just subtle changes that your instincts pick up instantly. But instead of trusting those signals, people try to reason them away. They say, maybe I'm overthinking, or maybe it's just stress, or the classic, maybe it's nothing. Funny how the brain tries so hard to silence the one voice designed to protect it. Instincts are the first alarm system, but people treat them like background noise. They want logic, evidence, something they can hold in their hands and say, look, now I have a reason. But life doesn't always gift you clues wrapped neatly in ribbons. Sometimes the warning comes in the form of discomfort. Sometimes the truth arrives as a feeling you can't explain, and if you ignore it, that ignored whisper turns into a scream later. But by then, the damage is already done. There's a strange beauty in watching people act surprised by outcomes they saw coming from miles away. They act shocked when betrayal hits, when a relationship collapses, when a friend suddenly switches sides. But the signs were there. The inconsistencies were there. The discomfort was there. They just chose to blindfold themselves because facing the truth feels like confrontation, and confrontation feels like chaos, and chaos terrifies them. They'd rather protect their illusion than accept their reality. But here's where it gets interesting. That inner voice people keep silencing. It never stops observing. It watches quietly. It remembers details the conscious mind tries to forget. It tracks patterns. It connects dots while you're out there pretending everything is fine. That voice is building a case against the lies you tell yourself. And eventually, it presents you with a truth so clear, so undeniable, that you can't run anymore. You're forced to face what you already knew, long before you were willing to admit it. People think intuition is mystical. It's not. It's survival. It's the result of every experience you've ever had, piecing itself together to protect you from repeating the cycles that hurt you. It notices micro-expressions, tone shifts, behavioral changes, emotional energy. It gathers data the logical mind is too slow or too scared to process. And when it whispers, it's not guessing. It's warning you based on everything you've ever survived. But the real comedy lies in how people treat their intuition like an inconvenience. They silence it because it disrupts their fantasies. They bury it because it threatens the comfort they cling to. They drown it out with excuses because believing the truth would force them to make a move they aren't ready for. And so they pretend. They play dumb. They label their instincts as paranoia. But deep down, they know. They always know. There's a moment, though a turning point, when the truth becomes louder than the lies, when the discomfort grows heavier than the excuses, when the energy shifts so drastically that even denial can't hold it back. That's when people finally admit what they sensed all along. They say, I should have trusted my gut. They say, something felt off. They say, I knew this was coming. And they're right. They did know. But knowing and acting are two different things. That's the tragedy. Not that they didn't see the truth, but that they saw it and refused to believe themselves. They needed life to slap them awake. They needed confirmation in the form of chaos. And chaos never arrives gently. When you ignore your instincts, the universe sends consequences to prove to you what you tried so hard to deny. That's not punishment, it's correction. It's life pulling you back into alignment after you wandered too far from your own wisdom. And once you start trusting yourself, everything changes. You stop tolerating energies that drain you. You stop entertaining people who don't match your sincerity. You stop allowing your fear of losing something to override your need to protect your peace. You move sharper, quieter, wiser. You stop needing signs from the outside because you finally realize the strongest signal was coming from within you the entire time. There's something fascinating about watching people walk straight into consequences they were warned about 100 times. Not because they're blind, but because they pretend the danger isn't real until it finally decides to introduce itself. And that's the thing about signs. They don't disappear just because you ignore them. They wait, patiently, quietly. And the moment you think you've escaped the truth, it steps right in front of you like it never left. Every ignored warning carries a cost. People like to believe life hands out gentle reminders, second chances, reversible outcomes. But it doesn't. Life isn't some polite teacher who repeats instructions until you finally pay attention. It gives you signals. It gives you tension. It gives you discomfort, and if you still turn away, it gives you consequences. The kind that don't politely knock on your door. The kind that kick it down. You can always tell who ignored the signs. They're the ones who look shocked when everything collapses. They stand there, eyes wide, asking, "How did this happen?" As if the universe didn't whisper in their ear months ago. As if their intuition didn't scream. As if the tension in their chest wasn't real. But denial is a warm blanket, isn't it? It keeps you comfortable long enough to forget you're freezing underneath. People love avoiding the truth because the truth requires action, and action requires responsibility. And responsibility demands change. Change is messy, unpredictable, uncomfortable. So instead, they cling to the familiar, even when the familiar is slowly damaging them. They convince themselves it's safer to stay where they are. But safety isn't always calm. Sometimes it's a cage. And the longer you stay inside, the smaller the world feels. There's this funny pattern. Life whispers first, then it nudges, then it shoves, then it hits. Not because it hates you, but because it refuses to let you sleepwalk through a lesson meant to shape you. The signs you ignored were never meant to scare you. They were meant to prepare you. But preparation becomes punishment only when you refuse to listen. Think about every time you sensed something was off, every time a person's words didn't match their actions, every time a room's energy shifted, every time your stomach tightened for no visible reason. Those weren't random sensations. That was your inner alarm system trying to save you from a future you weren't built to survive. But instead of listening, you labeled it overthinking. Instead of trusting it, you silenced it. Instead of acting, you waited. And waiting is where most people lose the battle, because the cost of ignoring a warning grows with time. A small whisper becomes a storm. A tiny misalignment becomes a collapse. A subtle discomfort becomes a disaster. And by the time you realize how wrong everything feels, the damage has already collected interest. That's the part no one likes to talk about. The part where your hesitation becomes the very thing that destroys you. But here's the twist. Every consequence you face isn't random. It's tailored. Designed specifically from the signs you chose to overlook. Life doesn't punish you with strangers. It punishes you with situations you recognize too late. It doesn't blindside you with chaos. It blindsides you with the truth you tried to hide from. And that truth always returns. It waits behind the door of every decision you postponed. People say things like, "I wish I had known," but they did know. They just didn't want to accept it. And that's the difference between the ones who grow and the ones who break. Growth requires honesty, brutal, uncomfortable honesty. The kind that forces you to admit you were wrong, that you stayed too long, that you trusted too much, that you ignored the moment everything inside you told you to run. But there's something powerful about finally understanding this. Something almost liberating. When you realize that every consequence was actually a missed opportunity to act sooner, you begin to treat your instincts differently. You start paying attention. You start questioning inconsistencies. You start protecting your peace like it's the last valuable thing you have, because now you know what happens when you don't. You move differently. You listen faster. You leave quicker. You stop letting fear be the reason you stay stuck. You stop giving people the benefit of the doubt when your soul already collected the evidence. You stop waiting for a disaster to confirm what a whisper already told you. And that's when you finally understand. The signs weren't the threat. The consequences were. The whisper wasn't the danger. Your silence was.